I chose to do my capstone book report on Who Let Them In? Pathbreaking Women in Sports Journalism by Jordyn in 2022. In her acknowledgments, she wrote, "To all the little girls who dream big dreams and don't take no for an answer, this is for you." I really took that to heart and wanted to relay that information as well. A little summary of the book. It tells the stories of women breaking into one of the most male-dominated fields in the world of sports media. Jordyn, a sports writer previous to writing this novel, highlights the confidence, bravery, and sheer determination of women who broke barriers to cover some of the biggest events, speak with some of the best athletes, and claim their well-earned place in press boxes, newsrooms, and locker rooms across the country. This book brings to light not only women of the past and their experiences, but connects the early pioneers to the newest generations of women in the industry, revealing all of the sacrifices that have paved the way for women to not have to be an abnormality in the locker room, but expected to be there. Who Let Them In includes women such as Melissa Ludke, Leslie Visser, Christine Brennan, Holly Rowe, Betsy Ross, and that's only to name a few. In first-hand accounts, interviews, and stories, a museum is painted about the constant obstacles the women faced in all eras and in all points of their careers. Stories that range from gender discrimination to persistent exclusion, but also stories of their perseverance to overcome the odds with resilience and professionalism. The central theme would be overcoming obstacles and challenging gender norms in a male-dominated sports field, with the sub-themes of leaving a legacy for future generations, representation in sports media, the impact of legal fairness through the Title IX Act, as well as perseverance during discrimination. So I want to kind of give a little bit of a reference for give a little bit of a timeline to what kind of is going on and why it is so important that women didn't get a foot in the door right away. So the first Stanley Cup was in 1893 for pro hockey. The first World Series for pro baseball was in 1903. The first NBA Finals for pro basketball was in 1947. And the first Super Bowl happens in around 1967 for football. So the first woman to even kind of break ground on the sport, to hit television, etc., be a journalist, doesn't happen until 1973, when the first woman, Leslie Visser, reported live from the Super Bowl. In 1997, Jessica Mendoza was able to report from the World Series game. In 2020, Doris Burke was able to report from the NBA Finals. And in 2020, Leah Hextall was able to call a play-by-play for a nationally televised NHL game. So now I'm going to go kind of into my agreements or agreement arguments, if you will. So the first one I kind of want to speak about would be women were not given the same opportunities as men. My first example is Mary Garber. She was one of the first women to pave the way in the 70s and 80s and was known to bring light to the need for desegregation in sports. While barred from the locker room, she would have to find ways to work around and find ways into the locker rooms to complete her assignments. That could mean sending other men into the locker room or waiting for all the men to come out and getting her story out later. While covering ACC games, she would have been escorted out of the press box to sit with the wives and children because that's where the men thought she belonged. And she was denied from the Southern Conference of Sports Writers and Atlantic Coast Sports Writers Association, which she would later become the president of. My next example is Leslie Visser. She reported on 7 major championships, the Final Four and the PGA Tour being two of them. Her stories were second-guessed and she was never given an opportunity because she would be dismissed by coaches and players and other reporters. She was escorted out of the 1980 Cotton Bowl because the Houston head coach told her he did not give a crap about the Equal Rights Amendment and was not having a woman in his locker room. Lastly, she would have been tested before games by her male coworkers to ensure she knew what she was talking about because she, as a woman, would be in front of the camera instead of a man. My second agreement would be women were not able to have it all. So my first example is Jackie McMullen. She was a national basketball writer for ESPN and regular team member of ESPN's Around the Horn. When she was at home, she felt like she should be at work, and when she was on the road, she wondered what she would be missing at home. She had 2 young children at home at the time. She quotes, "I tried too hard to be too many things for too many people." She ended up leaving the 1993 NBA Finals to go home and be a mom and a wife. She later said that probably saved her marriage. My next example is Amber Theo-Harris. She's a studio host for NFL Network's and Total Access. She retained her job after her birth of her second daughter in 2013. However, in 2015, after a 6-week maternity leave, was replaced by the woman filling in for her. She worked up until the day her third daughter was born out of fear of her losing her job. She quotes, "Every woman in the sports industry has that fear. You see how quickly you can be replaced when you're not pregnant." So some factual statements on that is at 5 years, 5 out of 10 women sports journalists have left the sports department by year 4, and with 2 more also contemplating leaving, going back to the newsroom. They are leaving because they want a social life or to start a family, or simply to there's simply too much discrimination within their job. It is called the Great Winnowing Out. Secondly, most women sports writers remain single or childless well into their 30s out of fear of losing their job and kind of having a tenure-ish position and having some comfortability. There wasn't a lot of role models at the time of kind of the 70s, 80s realm to emulate how to juggle dating, marriage, parenting with such a demanding job that sports writing does. My third example is women were bullied out of their sports. So my example is Lisa Olson. She was interviewing a player when 3 others surrounded her in the locker room and dared her to touch them. Following the incident, she had filed a civil lawsuit testifying slashing of her tires, broken into an apartment, and more than 100 obscene phone calls. She was also spit on while covering up their events. My next example is Susan Fornhoff. She had a pink corsage box with a live rat delivered to her in the press box by another male coworker. In the opposing locker room, players started chucking rolls of athletic tape at her head, and one came up behind her and kept a steady wolf's howl until she abandoned the interview. Another kind of quote or factual statements were women were kept quiet to keep their jobs. So when they were being bullied or sexually harassed out of their sport, it wasn't a huge thing. Sexual harassment wasn't huge in the 80s, and it was better to keep quiet and deal with it to be able to keep your job. A major example recently, in ESPN headquarters in 2001, a book reports that between 70 to 100 sexual harassment claims were made within the company by a woman in a 3-year span. With that being said, also 8 women filed 30 formal complaints, and with more settling off the record. And this kind of goes into my next statement, which is the Me Too movement. It is a movement it's a social movement and awareness campaign against sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and rape culture. My disagreements are so diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is a broad term that is not defined in the title of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but it prohibits employment discrimination based on protected characteristics such as race and sex. So throughout the book, there were many statements that referred that women were only offered jobs, especially ESPN, to be able to fit this requirement, that they needed to hit a quota of an 80-20, or however that percentage worked out, that they needed to have so many women in their workforce no matter if they were qualified or not, which I disagree with. I think that the women got their job because they were well qualified for it, and I think that is in any realm that you should be qualified for the job you are in. And I do believe that the women in this book made a mark for a reason, and they were very smart, and they were smart enough for the role that they were applying for. My next disagreement were women were offered jobs based on their looks. This kind of goes into also the DEI requirement. So oftentimes there were thoughts going around that because sports was such a male-dominated field, that watching a woman who looked nice in front of a camera would bring higher viewership to the network. Oftentimes at the time, skinnier women who were blonde were the go-to in the realm of sticking them in front of a camera. There were points that said that women of that look or appearance were offered the jobs even if they didn't understand what they were talking about. I think at one point that could have been potentially true, but I think in this day and age that there are so many qualified women that are also very good and very beautiful on an appearance rate, that they're not offered based off their looks, and they're not put in front of a camera because they look pretty. They are put in the camera because they have the knowledge behind what they are going to be speaking about. And then lastly, women are a distraction in the sports industry, specifically in men's sports. Having the opposite gender in dugouts, locker rooms, press boxes, etc. was a distraction to men trying to do their jobs, supposedly. However, in society, if society just looked at women in a male-dominated field as just another person in the room, there wouldn't be that much distraction. Not to mention the latter, which is the same issue of men in a women's locker room that has never been brought up. That could be potentially an issue. I don't believe that women are a distraction in the sports industry. I think we can do the same job in that realm that a man does. You stick us in if we understand what we're talking about, and you put us in that role. There shouldn't be a distraction. Treat us like another person in the dugout, in the locker room. Don't give us special treatment. Just treat us like we're another person there. I would recommend to anyone going into an industry that wasn't meant for you, or people think that's not meant for you, or that society has told you you don't belong in. I think this could apply to all women in technology, as I think technology in general is kind of a male-dominated field. Not just sports, as they're, like I said, both very male, heavily dominated. There were many good takeaways and quotes that came from the book, which I believe that anybody could benefit from, that I speak of in the next slide. I took time throughout the book to highlight and take notes on some of my favorites. I think it has value to all women or anyone in the DEI sector. It shows how in order to make moves in an industry, there must be path makers to follow, or be the path breaker yourself, or path maker yourself. It also brings to light the fact that it won't be a walk in the park, and that there will be many sacrifices made in order to make your dreams come true. So these are what I'm kind of talking about when I say I highlighted throughout the book. So some of my final thoughts would be extra. Do the extra work. It'll pay off in the end. Of course, you should always go after your dreams no matter what other people say. You're there for a reason. Don't try to blend in when you were born to stand out. This is specifically for male, I wasn't going to fail because some male didn't think I could do it. Don't let anyone else dictate your fun. Don't lose your passion for what you're doing. I can't even see myself. Sometimes you have to cross where it says don't walk. This is it. This is what I was meant to do. Say yes to every opportunity that's put in front of you. Loyalty, be there for the people who are there for you. And lastly, do what's right for you and keep following your dreams. I just kind of wanted to put in here also some notable women that kind of path broke into the industry. This is kind of just an extra if you stick along and read into it. If you made it this far, thank you. Don't let anyone define your fun. Find your passion. And in order to see the rainbow, you have to deal with the rain. Thank you.